What is going down, everybody? Welcome to the final Wisecrack Show Me the Meaning podcast.
Show me the meaning
Of being lonely.
of the
Is
last
this a
picture
feeling
show.
I need to know?
I love that our
Tell me
last
what-
episode's gonna get copyright strike.
Oh yeah, the oops. What up, everybody? I'm Austin Hayden. I am joined for the final time by the Show Me the Meaning crew. We have Ryan,
Sup, film fans?
and we've got Raymond.
I'm looking at the link that Matt sent me for the YouTube stream, and it has the Scream thumbnail on it. Which does seem fitting because we are getting our fucking throat slit, people.
Oh no. And I just wanted to say that it's been such a pleasure podcasting with 2 and 3 humans and 4 humans that are all taller than me for the most part. And I'm just glad that we got guests on who were shorter than me every once in a while,
You're a
because
man
then
among
I could be.
giants.
This is an audio
Yeah.
podcast, Austin. No one can tell how tall we are.
But this information has been revealed and it's been illuminating for me. And anyway, everybody, thank you so much. As I said, this is the final episode of Show Me the Meaning for various reasons. We are closing shop. We're sad about it. We're not happy about it, but this is the world that we live in. Sometimes things don't go your way. But that is okay, because where one thing dies, another thing emerges. And so make sure you stick around to the end of the podcast, because we do have some announcements to make about some new projects, film podcasts that we have in the work and things like that. So definitely make sure to stick around for that. But yeah, for the last podcast, we decided to talk about, I guess for our last picture show, we decided to talk about The Last Picture Show, the 1971 classic starring Jeff Bridges and Babelicious Sybil Shepherd. And you know, I'm gonna be honest, Cloris Leachman really does it for me in this film. Tim Bottoms, she's great. Timothy Bottoms, and it's obviously directed by Peter Bogdanovich. This is one of the classics of the new Hollywood. Did I not say Jeff Bridges? Jeff Bridges. Babyface. What is he? 19 in this film.
One
of the classics.
He's looking great in this.
And Sam the Lion he's one of those guys that if you're a fan of Westerns, you probably don't know who he is, but you're like, oh, I know that face. It's Ben Johnson, who I had to Google because I was like, why do I know this fucking face? And then I was like, oh my God, The Wild Bunch, and so many freaking Westerns. But yeah, so we're going to talk about The Last Picture Show, and then we're going to do some reminiscing, talking about some of our favorite memories from the show, since this film is all about mood and tone, and as Raymond was saying, it's kind of light on plot, but it's more about just a feel, a vibe, as the kids say these days. So first things first, let's do this. Let's talk about the film, and then we'll use the film and its themes to open us up into a broader discussion about this podcast, why we love film, nostalgia, what does film do for us? Because I think that's kind of one of the things that this film really allows us to do, is look at the dying of an old age and kind of welcoming in a new generation. So anyway, let's just go around.
Also, just to piggyback on that, you know, also it's like, remember Coda just 2 days ago won Best Picture, right? We're at the almost like the weird intersection of stream, which is an Apple Plus movie, you know, so it's like streamers are taking over. It's like we're at a weird intersection of cinema. We can talk about that, but also like Austin said, we're not going to be just talking about The Last Picture Show here. So definitely, if y'all have any questions for us just about the podcast, about episodes in the past, about anything about Show Me the Meaning, you know, you guys can start putting them in the chat, and we can basically start.
Oh, that's right.
We're
live.
Sound
we're
off
live
in the
on a
chat.
screen
We'll
right
do
now.
a little impromptu Q&A throughout the episode.
Yeah, we'll basically do a Q&A at the end, you know, if you guys have some good questions. So anyway, take it away, Austin.
Yeah, well, so this is going to be kind of a free-form discussion. So let's talk about, I guess, this film. You know, we don't even have to do first impressions. Let's just talk about what do we think about this film.
Well, I
I
do kind of. Had you guys seen the movie before? Because this was my choice.
I have.
Had you seen it before, Raymond?
Yes, I saw it in high school, so it was a much needed rewatch.
Okay, cool. So we all I
saw it like 20 years ago.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah,
I actually saw it in film school with Peter Bogdanovich. There it was an actual. He came with a film print of it. and I had never seen the movie, and he came and he was awesome. He, if you haven't seen him do interviews, he's really, one of the things he's known for is doing like impressions of other famous filmmakers, so or actors. So he's doing like John Ford and Alfred Hitchcock and Stanley Kubrick, and he's also his main one that cracked me up was Jimmy Stewart. Not an not a record actor, but he does a great Jimmy Stewart. So I don't know. He's just a very interesting movie guy, and that's how I saw the movie first. But,
okay, well then,
what are our thoughts?
Yeah,
on
you started off then, so you can. I mean, it can be first impressions, but let's just freeform this thing.
Yeah, dude, I just love, like you said, the vibe of the movie. Peter Bogdanovich is kind of a he's I guess a quote unquote auteur and from that New Hollywood era, but he's also more so than the other filmmakers that he's very much about his influences, right? He's very much about kind of going back into the past and using what works in the past. And he has an awesome book where he's hanging out talking to he doesn't have the Hitchcock book. That's Truffaut. It's him talking to John Ford. He's just really into old Hollywood, and you can see that all over this movie. And this movie's about old Hollywood too, in a way. It's about the dying of this. The one thing these people in this small town have, which is a movie theater. So I love the style of it. I love the black and white style. It's a very, I guess I'd call it a naturalistic feel. Like it feels like you're just kind of watching these people live. And it's following a whole bunch of characters. And the other thing I love about the movie is just that not only do we get to see Jeff Bridges, who later becomes a star, kind of in his infancy, but what was I going to say? Fucking like it sums up multiple generations is my main thing that I love about the movie is that it's the passage of time, which is hard to do in a movie because you got 2 hours, it's usually 3 acts, and you're kind of like it's hard to do a movie that encompasses a long period of time or even though this is kind of mainly a summer, but you're getting multiple generations take on a long period of time, which is another thing that's hard to do with this cool ensemble cast. So yeah, I love that theme of the movie the most is all these kids at the beginning of their life. They have so much to live for. You have all these characters that have lived life and had the shit kicked out of them, and they're looking at they're living vicariously through them. And then also just being from a small town in Tennessee, I really related to just there's shit to do sometimes, and the movies is where it's at, and so I get being bored. So anyway, those are just a bunch of rambling thoughts and notes on the movie I had. What are y'all?
Yeah, what about you, Raymond?
To pick up where Ryan left off, I think when I first watched this, I don't necessarily want to say it like went over my head because it's not as though the film is too cerebral, but the movie is about a lot of like wistfulness and nostalgia in a way, but it's also got a very kind of like jaded sense of nostalgia about it. So it's one of those things that I don't think like a high schooler is fully emotionally primed to connect with. But on this watch, yeah, it definitely resonated quite a bit more. And Ryan, I liked what you were saying about the sort of multi-generational thing that we kind of touched on that with Willy Wonka. And you do get the sense in this movie that like Jeff Bridges and Timothy Bottoms are seeing themselves in Clu Gulager and Sam, and then those guys are kind of seeing their future in the coach, and like there's just all these sort of these sort of glimpses of what the future has in store, or over, for Sybil Shepherd, her future may be Cloris Leachman, or her mom. Like there's obviously the movie's quite consciously doing that stuff, but it's the kind of thing that probably went over my head 10 or 15 years ago. And it is just, I bring up nostalgia. And to me, I always think of nostalgia as being like a yearning for the past. And in that way, this movie doesn't feel nostalgic. It feels like, I can't quite put my finger on it. I'm sure maybe you guys can help me articulate it at some point, but there is just a weird kind of acidity to it. It doesn't seem like Peter Bogdanovich is looking back with rose-colored glasses. It seems like this place is, it's dead, and there's this suffocating and hot and sweaty atmosphere to it, and scenes that, for example, the swimming pool scene where she disrobes in front of all the other kids, and they're all in the pool naked. Times were a little bit different back then, but even allowing for that, there's still this very icky sense about it, and I think that's intentional. But you have this sense as you're watching it that this is just like, it's almost inescapable. It's almost inevitable. Like, she has to do this because, like you were saying, Ryan, like, what else is there to do? That even if there's something very concerning about this, or her hackles are raised, you still get this sense that, like, well, it beats, hanging out on this dead end street in a dead end town. And there's something kind of magic about that to this movie, that, like, while these folks are making these kind of, like, objectively bad decisions, and a lot of the time due to pressure from outside and other characters or their peers, you still don't doubt that they would make those decisions, because it's like, it's just something to do. And there's just in a weird way that this movie feels like it's just so defined by this sense of loss and longing, and it really is kind of beautiful the way that it captures all of that. But I don't know, what do you think, Austin?
The first time I saw the film, it definitely went over my head. I remembered certain scenes. I remember being told that this was a classic for all the reasons. But it didn't quite land on me when I saw it, which was, probably 15, 20 years ago, when I was in high school or something. And rewatching it now, I was much more attuned to this, like, claustrophobia of being in this small town, of having your path charted for you. I like how you talked about there's, like, the figures that they could have been were already embodied figures, right? So Sybil Shepherd's character, she's either going to be her mom in a miserable marriage, but she's going to have money, but the only excitement she's going to have is to transgress the marriage contract, which, Sybil Shepherd's whole thing at one point when she's talking about having sex is, like, with her mom. Her mom's like, why don't you just have sex with your boyfriend, And she's like, isn't that a sin? Isn't that a sin? And so there's something about transgression, which makes you think that, in transgression, these people can find freedom. But that's actually not true, because in transgression, you just simply mimic what everybody else is doing. So there's actually no freedom. There's nothing. The only freedom is death in this film. The only freedom is when you actually die. Like, even getting out and going to Dallas, like she does at the end of the film, I still feel like, she's going to end up back in that town, or she's just going to be, like, fitting out that carved path that was laid out for her. So it's a very sort of,
it's the path of least resistance.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so I was thinking a lot about, like, this claustrophobic feel. And then I was also thinking, I love what you said, Raymond, about it not feeling like nostalgia, because nostalgia tends to romanticize a past, whereas this one seems to be bemoaning, while also at the same time highlighting the reality that transitions always take place, right? The transition from childhood to adulthood is the transition from cinema as being the dominant media form to television. The transition from film to digital in cinema that you see a lot of, like, contemporary filmmakers over the last 20 years complaining about, and now the transition from theater to streaming at home, which is related to the digital revolution. But so there's this idea of transition that Bogdanovich is talking about as almost being like a fall. It's almost like a religious fall narrative, and the fact that this takes place in Texas, which is a very conservative Christian town, especially it's made in the 70s, takes place in the 1950s, filmed in black and white. I think we're supposed to get the feel of 1950s claustrophobia, the death of the old world, and the type of particular transition that was confronting people at that time. And maybe what Bogdanovich is saying is that the reason we're in a crisis of cinema that we are now in the 1970s is because of what happened in the 1950s. And we're living now downstream from this, and we're suffering from this. And so this is our efforts to find that freedom, to transgress, right? To bring cinema back. In some ways, maybe there's something in that, even if it's not conscious that he's trying to do that. There's something in his vitality, that he was a stage actor, so like he comes out of like this need to like perform and do things. So in my mind, I'm thinking of, it's his way of like kind of just libidinally being like, we need to fucking break free, which libido is so important because this film is all about these horny fucking teenagers and these disgruntled horny adults who like they're trying to again just find a release for something, but there's nothing to fucking do in this town. And so then you have the theater, and what does the theater give them? Not an escape. I don't like thinking of media and art and things like that as an escape. I think that's a really sort of common thing that people talk about, but I don't think it's an escape. I think it's more than that. It's something more productive than that. It's a place to actually stimulate new ideas for what the world can be, or to interpret how the world once was. And of course, they're listening to fucking Hank Williams Jr. or Hank Williams, not Jr. They're listening to Hank Williams constantly, diegetically in camera. It's that same friggin' "you're cheating hard," blah blah blah, or whatever. It's the same freaking songs over and over again. So again, there's a repetition. And then they're watching westerns because they're in Texas, and this is like the story of their lives. So there's just something about that I think is what really struck me this time around.
It's so weird. I had to double check when I was watching this that this came out 2 years before American Graffiti, because it feels like a direct rebuke of that movie.
Right?
It feels like
the
evil twin,
yes.
Of American Graffiti. What were you gonna say, Ryan?
Fuck. What the fuck was I going to say? There was something else, but specifically about the Western point you were making, Austin. I mean, also, especially in film school, I remember them talking like, obviously the Western is about America, right? Yeah. It's about the story of the country that you're in, and so you're watching kind of the inspired, like, entertaining, like what's the word, optimistic view of America, and then you're kind of like, also but the movie is set in this dying town with these people who are basically depressed to be there, and then a bunch of kids who don't know any better, or what's coming to them. And so it's kind of almost like an ironic choice to have these westerns there. And I agree. And I also, the other thing I was gonna say is I agree with you. You said it really well about the word escape and stuff, and how people use movies like, it's almost like our lives suck so bad, but we gotta go watch movies to get away from them. I agree with what you said. It's their entertainment, to a lot of people, but also they're places that have new ideas exposed to you, and you're seeing new things that you would never have thought about on your own, and surprises, baby, the whole time. I think that what you said was cool.
Yeah. I mean, so normally at this point, what we do is we go into a recap. Let's just do like a real loose form recap. We don't need to go into all the ins and the outs and stuff like that. Basically, it's about a group of people in small town Texas, particularly a bunch of teenagers who are about to graduate. They're all horny for different people. They're all trying to find their way. And then you also have these adults. You've got Sam the Lion, who runs the local pool hall, who also kind of figures as a sort of father figure for a couple of the kids. You've got a diner that they frequent. You've got the lonely housewife who's married to the coach at the school, who ends up striking up an affair with one of the teenagers. Some of the kids want to have sex. They're all obsessed with sex, but none of them are having it. And then even when they do have it, they don't have good sex, and then they don't really understand what they're doing with their sexuality. So there's just this really paltry exploration of sexuality, which is not like the fault of the film. It's because, especially in conservative parts of the country, they don't teach you what good sex is. The best that they'll ever do is teach you maybe to fucking what safe sex is, but even then, they never teach you what good sex is. So it's just bad sex and bad sexuality, bad desire. There's nothing to do in this freaking town. So then you got Jeff Bridges and his girl, who have been going together for a while. That's Sybil Shepherd. His name's Dwayne. What was her name again? I forget her character's name. JC. So yeah, and JC ends up kind of like striking out on her own and feeling like she needs to do something because she's looking at the monotony of everyday life. Her mom even says that, right? You do something enough times and it just becomes monotonous and boring. So she's feeling this entrapment that she's got to go out and try something different. So she goes to this like freaking naked pool party and tries to make out with people. And maybe she's going to find her joy there. But even then, her solution is always conservative. I'm just going to marry this other guy, right? And so then she ends up, none of that ends up working out and giving her jollies like she thought it might. So she ends up marrying Timothy Bottom's character, totally forgot his name at the moment. What's his name?
JC.
I know, I just saw the fucking thing.
JC. I know.
Timothy Bottoms. No, it's Sonny.
Sonny, that's right. She marries Sonny just so she can piss her parents off, but she doesn't really want to do it because she leaves a note for them so that they'll track her down and like get the annulment and stop the marriage. That ends up happening. So she's getting a little bit of excitement, all at the expense of Sonny. And basically at the end, what ends up happening is the local, I guess he's deaf, but is he also like cognitively disabled? They don't really explain. He ended up getting hit by a car and dying, and he was kind of like one of the boys that the other boys kind of took care of or sometimes like put in shitty situations. He ends up dying, and you kind of get this whole theme about like death and like a generational conflict as well, where like the older people in the town just don't understand the kids these days, sort of thing. And the film ultimately finishes off with Dwayne, played by Jeff Bridges, who's going to get ready to go off to Korea, having one final stay in the town, meeting up with his buddy Sonny, and trying to figure out what they're going to do in town. They go to see the final screening at the local movie theater. That's why it's called The Last Picture Show. And they go see this film. It's a John Wayne Western. They go see it. And then they fucking bail, and there's nothing else to do in the town because the town is about to die as well. So, what else? Did I miss anything else? These are kind of the themes.
Pretty much it.
Yeah. I mean, I think there were probably a bunch of people who turned off the podcast because you said, I'm not going to do one of the long recaps. And of course, everyone wants the patented long recap. This is your last chance to do one of the absurdly long recaps. But then you redeemed yourself. That's still a pretty long recap.
It's pretty long. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think, you kind of closed the loop there saying, the last picture show is the one that they attend in movie. What do you guys think about the title as it applies to the film itself rather than the film within the film? Anything to shake loose there? Is it worth barking up that tree?
I mean, is this film a sort of like bemoaning of the death of the picture show? That there are no more picture shows? That somehow the last picture show ended in the we don't have them anymore. And so this film is kind of a weird, ironic statement because it itself is a quote picture show. But maybe it's saying that the picture show is dead. Like there is no more the picture show. Now we have cinema. Now we have something else. Now we have celebrities and movies, which I guess they had, but under the studio system, maybe they were different. I don't know. I'm just bullshitting.
I don't think it's that because I mean movies existed outside of their town. It's just that their town was dying, you know. And so another like little weird fact is that the town in Red River is like Abilene, the cow town, and then which is kind of he named the town that they're in. What is it, Aranine or something?
Aranine, yeah.
Or Anarine to
Anarine, yeah.
Yeah. So like that was an obvious homage to the movie itself. So I think he's more just commenting. This is based on a book. A dude's basically a biography, even though he claims that he made a lot of it up. But people in the town are like, ooh, I think this person was this person, this person was this person. So I think this is more about this, towns like this and the people in them and just what the picture show itself means to a town. Like if basically you don't have, like what you were saying, the stories and stuff, the things to give us new ideas. What do you have in the town? Even though obviously the pictures were relatively new, even I guess in the 50s. But it's kind of like it's more of just a symbol of hope for the town. And if you're taking that away, I think, because the movie is pretty dark and depressing, right? So I think that is kind of I don't know, cinematic visual allusion to that.
There is a weird thing with it that not just with the ravages of time wearing down the building itself, but you kind of triggered something in my mind there, Ryan, this notion that, you know, maybe that theater was once a symbol of modernity on a pretty quiet small town street, and now it's like it's kind of a symbol of antiquity in a way, and it's kind of rusting away with the rest of the town, whereas, you know, maybe before it was indicative of promise and potential, and thought, oh yeah, it's gonna liven up the main street, and it'll bring people in, and this town is really booming, and we're gonna grow, and now it's just like, oh yeah, it's pretty quaint compared to like you said, there are probably movie palaces out in the bigger cities and stuff like that, and it just
Dallas.
And it's kind of getting left behind. This notion, Austin, you had mentioned as the person who runs the theater in the picture, that, you know, television is on its way in. There's a lot of hand wringing then in the motion picture business that they would be put under by TV. And
yeah, there we go.
Movies going straight into people's homes and what have you, and you know, it seems now like there's nothing new under the sun, because we obviously we can talk a little bit about like those same sort of arguments get dusted off with streaming and what have you. It really is, but it is kind of a poignant symbol, this sort of like paragon of technological advancement just going to pot with the rest of this little town.
That's why I wonder. So it's almost like the town dies as the picture show dies. The picture show dies because of the new technological advancements in media dissemination, which is television, which, as the woman says who runs the theater, is always all the time, which means that you never get a break in between. And it also means that there isn't anything unique about the experience. Like, if everything is media, then is anything media, right? It's like, if everything is a something, is it ever actually anything, right? Like, if everything is hot dogs, then nothing is hot dogs, right?
Well,
sure.
Because there's nothing to
Sure. Everything is hot dogs, though. If everything's hot dogs. I would like this to be everything hot dogs. I'm hungry now.
Yeah.
No, but it is that thing of like when everything is lumped into the content bubble of, you know, the movie and the review of the movie and the reaction to the review of the movie. This is something you guys probably scratched around the surface of with Bo Burnham's Inside, that episode. That he's clearly commenting on, and that there is something lost. I mean, maybe we can talk a little bit about the Oscars, for example. There is a real sense now, increasingly so, that I think for a long time, as Oscar ratings have kind of gone down and down, I'd say it's pretty conventional wisdom that movies don't hold the same cultural purchase that they once did. But I didn't watch the Oscars this year, but having seen reactions to it online and seeing clips of it, this seems like the year where, like, the people at the Oscars found out about the Oscars not being all that important anymore.
Hey, keep that name out your fucking mouth. Keep that word.
I'm glad you brought up the whole. Oh, sorry. Go on.
Oh no! I was just gonna put a button on that. That it does seem like maybe the folks who make the movies are finally getting the memo, and it's not. I'm not saying that. I'm not dancing on the grave of cinema. Obviously, I fucking love movies, but it is weird to see people recognizing, like, the call coming from inside the house for the first time in what seems like forever. What were you gonna say, Ryan?
I'm glad you brought up the whole streaming and TV thing and stuff, because I kind of when I was given my whole take on it a minute ago, I kind of said the opposite of that, but I more so agree with you that we're basically in the exact same time period as what the last picture show was depicting, in the sense that, like what y'all are saying, like this media transformation. But I do think it's worse, and I do think that they're almost more dead than they've ever been, even because, you know, I mean, when you guys were growing up, movies were huge, right? Like, I remember going to Jurassic Park and Aladdin and all that
Yes.
It was a big part of my life.
Like, it was a thing. Yes.
Like they did not die like they thought they were going to in the last picture show, right? So, which is interesting to me that. But
have they died now?
Well,
because
I do think that they
often like there's this fucking new TV. There's this new mini series called DMZ that my partner just like randomly, she was like, I don't know, I just fucking threw it on because Rosario Dawson was
based on a graphic novel, right?
Yeah, based on a comic book. Yeah. So I was like, it's about like American Civil War in the future. But I was like, how do all of these big celebrities like Rosario Dawson and fucking Julia Roberts, like how do they have so many projects that have come out and I know nothing about them? Like back in the day when Julia Roberts' name was attached to a project, I knew about it. When Rosario Dawson, even 15 years ago, was cast in Rent, I fucking knew about it. Like how do all of these celebrities have all of these projects coming out and then like 8 months, 10 months, a year and a half later, I'm like, wait, what? Who was in what? Like it isn't as much of a thing anymore. And in one sense, maybe that's good because maybe we're not idolizing people in some ways. But in another sense, I don't think we've somehow stopped idolizing people. Like, look at the shit that went down at the Oscars. We clearly still think that Will Smith is a god, and who gives a fuck like about this office party with all these dramas because they're it's an office party. It's literally an office party, and it has cameras on it. The Oscars, but like, who cares about these gods? Well, we've made them in. I don't know. I'm in a spicy mood, Ryan. I said this before. I'm ready. I'm ready. To get...
a couple of things. Like, yes, movies. There's a million more movies and stuff that people are making these days, but I think that's a good thing overall. It's just that people are choosing to consume them in different ways. Everyone that I know that I would have used to call to go to a movie, they're kind of like, I don't know, do I need to go see that one in the movie? I can get that one on HBO Max. So people that call themselves movie fans don't even go to the movies as much. People are just not into it as much. The Oscars is way different because that has its own other set of problems that basically people just are bored of award shows and they are boring and they are long. And if you're not really a geek about this stuff. So I don't think that that's like a 1-to-1 ratio in the sense that like, oh, because the Oscars are less watched, that means people are less into movies. People want to go to the movies and see awesome movies. It's that there's so few and far between because people at the end of the day are bad at getting in the habit of going to just something that they don't know everything about, some IP. Oh, I'm going to go to this sequel. If it's something weird, they're probably going to catch it at home streaming. So, and the Oscars is more associated with theatrical presentation of movies. So
listen, I laugh because I'm starting to become like, you know how sometimes when your dad or your mom or your grandpa's like, you'll understand when you're older, and you're like, yeah, whatever, bro, like, you don't know me. I'm starting to be like, damn, some things, most of the stuff I disagree with my dad on in life, conservative evangelical dude. There are some things where I'm like, shit, I guess I get the generational divide thing. My best experiences going to the movies are when I saw Jurassic Park as a kid.
Hell yeah.
When my best experiences now are when I go and I see Alien, at like the local tiny independent theater house, and they're doing a retrospective or something like that. Or when I used to go to the Dundee Contemporary Art Museum in Dundee, Scotland with my boys. Shout out to Scott if you're listening to this. And we would go watch a fucking movie, and then we would sit afterwards and we would drink some beers and we would talk about the movie, and then it would turn into life and art and sex and politics, and then maybe the movie would come back in. Like, that was a thing. It was a moment. It was a thing that actually shaped it, rather than I'm gonna just consume something and then consume something else. And it's like just sticking my mouth to the faucet and just sucking in nutrients all day long. You don't get to come up for breath, man. Like, stop plugging shit into me and stuffing stuff into me. Let me fucking
stuff me, Hollywood.
To talk you off the edge, Austin. I think that's kind of the benefit of doing stuff like this, where we get to bring back the old, the salons of old, where we can talk about these things intellectually, or like you and Ryan just said, stuff all the hot dogs in our mouth at once. But on that note, we have
Hey, and I don't want to say that it's not just intellectual, because many times those nights I would end up in some dingy nightclub, like shooting fucking Jaeger bombs. Though, is that,
so I think movies have the power to transform, and I think they have the power to touch people's hearts and touch people's minds. And I just think that there is an extent to which, yes, there are a lot of movies that the kind of movies that used to get made that don't really get made so much anymore, at least not on a studio level. But I also think that in the constant churn of content, like there are more movies made in a year now than were made in a decade in the 60s or 70s.
Yeah.
So it is one of those things. It's tough for a movie to capture the cultural moment. And I also think that even people who are inclined to really engage with art and want to think about it critically, they're the ones who are most overwhelmed because they want to go out and engage with as much art as possible, and it's just coming from all directions. But I want to shout out someone in the chat. Sproggies or Spragies had a question for us. On this note, what does it mean for y'all for a film or TV show to be a 10 out of 10 or a 1 out of 10? And could you provide an example of each? He asked Ryan a follow-up. What would you say about Sallow, the 120 Days of Sodom? And Ryan's response in the chat is 10 out of 10. Hell yeah, Ryan.
10 out of 10. Yeah.
No question about it. Well,
just pump Passolini into my veins.
Austin, okay? I want to ask you an alternate question too, real quick, about about how you're overwhelmed with choices. Do you go to a fucking all-you-can-eat buffet and just look at everything that's there for you and then go, fuck you, chef, for giving me all these choices, like it's not, you want the choices, right? You want all that stuff. It's like you got options. You just got to use some self-control. Am I wrong? Am I wrong?
The only all you can eat that I enjoy is sushi, and now I'm vegetarian. Okay. So this question, I
get it.
It hurts my heart.
For me, a 10 out of 10 is a must see. That's how I say. If I think you must see this movie, that is a 10 out of 10. A 1 out of 10 is something I am pissed off at usually.
You must not see.
It's not only a not see, because a not see could be
a not
see could be like a 4 out of 10.
Put your hand down. Put your hand down while you're saying that.
Like a 4 out of 10 or a 3 out of 10 would be like, all right, these aren't great movies, but whatever. But if I give it a 1 out of 10, that means that I am like actively angry at this movie and the filmmakers. I'm like, how dare you make me watch this? That's what will deserve a 1 out of 10 for me.
What about a bad film that people should see? How do you rate that?
A bad film that people should see?
Yeah. Like it's like The Room. Like it's so bad. Or
I give The Room a 7 on a good day, a 7 out of 10, which means good for me, because I do think that it is that's hard to say. It's a good time at the movies.
Yeah. That's right. It is a good. Especially if you got like your plastic cutlery that you're throwing at the screen.
Yeah. As long as you pick up your spoons.
Just pick up your spoons.
But yeah, what's y'all's answers?
Okay, can you think of a 1 out of 10 film that like you think, like essentially I think with 1 out of 10 do not see, like, are you saying like they should just like burn the celluloid and just destroy all the copies so nobody can ever
Luckily for y'all, I have every movie I've ever rated or seen rated on IMDb, so I can show you all my 1 out of 10s and tell you right now. Copper.
God, I wish I had this discipline.
Friends with Benefits, starring Mila Kunis and Justin Timberlake. That movie pissed me off.
Didn't the creator of New Girl create that one? Elizabeth Harrowitz?
Will Gluck did. This is 40. Judd Apatow's This is 40. That movie pissed me off.
I'm sensing a theme here.
Blues Brothers 2000. Fuck that movie. Sacha Baron Cohen's The Dictator. 1 out of 10.
Oh yeah.
Steven Soderbergh's remake of Solaris can go fuck itself. 1 out of 10. This is a New York Stories, the Woody Allen, Francis Ford Coppola. That one's a little weird because I did like one of them, like the Woody Allen one.
The anthologies.
Makes me laugh, but Francis Ford Coppola is just can go fuck itself.
Why did we spend all this time for the past couple years like trying to think about movies critically when this podcast where Ryan just yells about shit is 100% more entertaining?
Salo, 120 Days of Sodom, must see. 10 out of 10.
Austin, you mentioned that the best theatrical experience of your life was Jurassic Park. Ryan, what's that for you, man? What immediately comes to your head?
I don't know if it is Jurassic Park. It's just
experiences like that. Sure.
Yeah.
Are you asking me what I rated Jurassic Park? I'm gonna guess.
No. What's not necessarily what you think of Jurassic Park, but what is the best, and not even the best movie you've seen in theaters, but the best theatrical experience? What do you think?
Oh, dude, I've had so many of those, but I'm going to Last Action Hero, and there was a row of summers where every summer me and my family would go for 4th of July. I would go to the big movie that year, and it was like Last Action Hero, Men in Black, and Jurassic Park Lost World or something. No, Jurassic Park 1, maybe even. I don't know. Either way, all those years, it was just crack for my 7-year-old brain or 10-year-old brain or whatever the hell, however old I was.
Dude, I had a great time. I went to go see Uncharted the other day in the theater with my girl. We both were fans of the video game series, and I think that Uncharted 4 is one of like my favorite games I've ever played. And so I had zero expectations that it was going to be a good movie, but I had so much fun. Like, yeah, sure, I could sit there with my critical brain and be a grump about it. But honestly, just being in these comfy chairs in the theater with my girl late at night during the week, watching this silly action film, I had a great time. Like, going to the theater is so, like, the chances that I'm going to enjoy it, even if I don't love the film, is better because the experience is what really gets me.
I've always heard that those games are, like, even structured like movies, that they're very cinematic down to the actual
especially
gameplay.
The last one. It's made by the same creators that did like The Last of Us and The Last of Us 2, so it's extremely theatrical.
So I mean, does it seem like it benefits from that? Was it a fairly standard or a fairly faithful adaptation? Like it's that seems like sort of a winning formula if the movie or if the game is already kind of built like a. Welcome to our episode about our final episode about Uncharted starring Tom Holland.
The game's still Uncharted 4 is still 100 times better. It's just so hard to translate because the games are so much more. They're so much wider in their scope and what they can do. The biggest problem with like action films today for me is that they're actually really small because everything's fucking green screened. What you have are a bunch of like mid shots on the celebrity or whoever it is that's the sexy person that they're trying to push on social media, and then you just have like some digital shots, but you don't have like landscape shots. Like fucking Hell or High Water had more big landscape shots where you're just like, oh my god, look at the country that they're in, and like you're just like there weren't in the third act. There's a little bit of like some big grandiose shots of like these islands, but in the game, like you're standing up on this fucking hilltop and you're looking out over these oceans and these seas, and because the graphics are so amazing, you're like just sucked in by the sublime of the immensity. But these action films these days, they're so small, even though there's like lots of loud noises. So then they try to make up for it by just making everything go boom, like the new Batman movie, which destroys your ears.
Ryan, are you a gamer?
It's debatable. Not really.
A little bit. I'm curious what you guys think. Maybe this is to tie it back to the Last Picture Show. Do you feel like some of the energy around video games has sort of taken the air out of the room for cinema?
No.
That a lot of like cinematic storytelling is happening more on the small screen, whether like you hear that a lot with TV, but being in the game and playing it for yourself, do you think that people just naturally connect with that a bit more than going out and seeing a movie that might challenge them a little bit? Not that video games can't be.
My opinion, no. Like I think there's way more people that are into having a very passive experience of sitting on their ass and having a story be told to them rather than than play a game. I mean, obviously they're huge, but I think there's room in the world for video games and cinema and TV and all of it. It's just it's just that people have conflated movies as something they can basically watch on their TV, and they forgot about the whole cool in the dark watching it on a big screen with a bunch of people part of it that objectively I think makes certain movies way better. there's some movies you don't need to have that experience, you know. But we're certainly in the, you know, how Spielberg predicted several years ago, like the time where it's just going to be the big Marvel roller coaster movies, Avatar 2s and whatnot, whenever the fuck it comes out. That's all that's going to be in the cinema soon.
You mentioned that, and I think there is that's an interview that kind of rings in my head quite often. That notion of these movies taking up all the oxygen and pushing smaller, you know, arguably more interesting fare to the margins.
But I don't think it's them taking the oxygen, because I think that you could have a world where there's Marvel movies and the indie movies together. It's just that human beings have trained themselves to not want to go out to the theater to see the indie movies. Too,
well,
in addition,
I don't know. I think the tail might be wagging the dog there, because I like people see, like, on average, I read that people see 6 movies a year. That's the average film goer makes it to the theater 6 times a year. And when there are 6+ huge event movies, I don't blame people for making those their 6 trips. But I do think that some of the onus is on, I think this goes without saying, a lot of the onus is on studios for only focusing on those types of movies to the exclusion of, you know, whatever, your last picture shows. And it is really, really tough to say to someone who maybe lives in a small town like this, oh, well, it's on you that we only get Spider-Man 18 because you didn't go out to support the worst person in the world. Worst person in the world ain't playing on that screen because nobody's going to it.
Yeah.
You know, it's...
Well, and also... there's an economic element to this as well. Wages have stagnated since the 1970s, and the cost of going to the movie theater is fucking insane. When my girl and I went to go see Uncharted, we also noticed that there was a family of like 6 that was with us, and we were like, how much fucking money does it cost? $30 a ticket, maybe more, depending on what part of the world you're in, right? So in Australia, Sydney. Yeah. Sydney's expensive. Right. Yeah, so Sydney's an expensive city anyway. So let's say it's $30 a ticket plus a popcorn and a drink. Like you're talking, that's like a $500 day outing to go to the movies with your family. That's insane.
How'd you get to $500?
Yeah, how many people are in this family?
Well, I'm thinking like 30 times.
Are you taking a fucking limo?
$200, and then they all want a freaking popcorn and a drink. That's like $30 each. You're like $400, and then parking is another $20. Like, I don't know.
One of our listeners, Strictly Sega, just jumped into the chat and said they make the effort to see big blockbusters at cinema instead of indies due to the expensive special effects. And I think that makes sense. I mean, like, I may not be crazy about big Hollywood superhero flicks, but at least those you do feel like you're going to get some bang for your buck. Now, it may be the bells and whistles that I don't really care all that much about. But like you're saying, Austin, if you're going to put all the kids in the car and take them, you know, on a night out to see a movie, yeah, you're going to go to something that's going to be a bit more entertaining, a bit more of a crowd pleaser. But to circle back where I landed before, I wasn't negating my argument by saying that no one is going to go see an indie movie, so therefore it won't play in a small town. It's just that, like, those markets by and large, demographically are not going to have the kind of support for certain smaller movies that are more niche interest that generally only play in bigger cities anyway. But I think that there's a false dichotomy at play here, that we're talking about this Spider-Man and worst person in the world, or really, really low, you know, $1 to $5 million indies. But back in the day, studios used to make an effort to make 20, 30, $40 million movies. Like 1989 is the year that I always bring up, because fucking Batman, I think, was #1 at the box office. #2 was Rain Man. Like, that's insane to think about now. Just imagining a movie like Rain Man, of that film's pedigree, doing that well at the box office, or even getting that kind of release to be able to pick up that sort of steam. Well, and studios just aren't interested in making those kinds of movies. But I do think there are a lot of people in smaller markets who would be interested in seeing stuff that's a little bit, smaller in scale, but still is kind of family friendly or can be a crowd pleaser or, you know, speaks to them in a different way than a superhero flick might.
Sure. Yeah, I think we're basically saying the same thing. I mean, this is basically a supply and demand issue. Is my whole point. And even in the big markets, like even in LA, like the ones that supposedly these indie movies are being made for, I'm saying people aren't going to them, and therefore they get made less. And it's like, all right, well, fuck it, let's just make all Marvel movies.
Let's do a little of this real quick, Raymond. Let me ask you, what's a 1 out of 10 film and what's a 10 out of 10 film for you?
To me, a 10 out of 10 film in the abstract is a movie that accomplishes what it's trying to do. That, like,
so Ernest goes to jail. Perfect.
What's that? Ernest goes to jail.
Yeah, perfect
Bingo.
version of what it's trying to do.
But what I mean by that, Ryan, you know, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Not that I'm a big Ernest fan or whatever, but I do think that people have a tendency to sort of like separate movies by what's a serious movie, what's not, blah, blah, blah. But I do think that there are really small or inauspicious films that accomplish what they set out to accomplish in a way that, you know, a movie with infinite resources can't really get across. It leaves you feeling empty or unsatisfied because it feels repetitive or monotonous. So for me, I mean, an example of a perfect movie in my mind is, the first one that comes to mind is Jaws. I think that's one of the best movies ever. I mentioned on a recent episode, I think Children of Men legitimately might be near the top of the heap of all movies ever made. I think that's a movie that accomplishes exactly what it sets out to accomplish. It's brilliantly acted, brilliantly made. As far as 1 out of 10 movies go, I kind of hew closer to Ryan's definition of like a movie that just can't justify its existence and that doesn't have anything commendable. And I hate to be mean-spirited about movies because I think they're all gifts, but there are, I always say that I don't hate any movies, but I do have like 2 or 3 exceptions. And I think I've already mentioned one on air, so I'll just go back to that one, which is Boondock Saints. I think is the worst movie ever made.
Give me a break. That movie is watchable though. Like,
and doesn't that movie set out something and then accomplish that something? That's what how do you
say it's overrated
like Me, Earl and the Dying Girl. You don't like Me, Earl and the Dying Girl, but that movie
I don't care for Me, Earl and the Dying Girl. I think Me, Earl and the Dying Girl is pernicious in a way. Like, I think Boondock Saints is kind of pernicious too. I find it to be just like a deeply ugly and mean-spirited movie made by an extraordinarily mean-spirited person. And I don't enjoy a moment of it. I think it's like if all the worst corners of Reddit wrote a script and then shot it very haphazardly.
Damn.
It's just a nauseating film. I can't stand it. However, I'm glad that it exists because Overnight is one of my favorite documentaries, which is an extremely satisfying movie to see an extremely mean-spirited person kind of get his comeuppance.
By Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah, it's kind of a real bad situation when you're watching a movie and sort of rooting for Harvey Weinstein.
Okay, let's do some of our favorite hits then from what we've talked about on this podcast. I mean, we've done quite a few. We can keep talking about The Last Picture Show and its themes, but I think it kind of just gives us an insight into talking about film and why we care about film in this podcast and what we get to do here. And
did you give your
culture?
Did you give your 10 out of 10 and 1 out of 10? Have we heard that?
Well, I mean, for me, a 10 out of 10 is something that at a baseline, it has to accomplish what it set out to do. But then for me, I think of scenes and I think of cinema a lot of times musically, melody, and the melody is kind of the spine, let's say, of it, right? And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of different combinations, maybe millions of different combinations of melodies that can be strung together, right? And if you listen to Thai music, for example, it sounds very, off key to Western ears that are used to certain types of scales with their melodies. So you have to learn to appreciate these different melodies, which is one of the things I love about watching an avant-garde film, which has a very different melodic structure than watching, a rom-com from Hollywood or a British dark tragicomedy, right? They all have these different melodies, and the more we expose ourselves to the different varieties of melodic possibilities, the more then you can see what those kind of baseline sort of standards are. And so for me, that's one of the reasons I love exploring the variety of cinema, is I want to learn all the different melodic structures so that I can watch a Bollywood film and be like, well, it might not be what I'm accustomed to, but I can learn to appreciate it in its context by attuning myself to the melody. So that's like that's the baseline for me. It has to accomplish a nice melody, we might say. But then I'm looking for harmonies. I'm looking for poetry. I'm looking for it could be a fucking guitar solo. I'm using music metaphors here, or the jazz riff where there's a melodic structure, but all of a sudden the pianist just goes off on one and you're like, oh my God, they just did something crazy. Now, sometimes they go off and they do something crazy, and even though the baseline structure is there, the melody is fine, but I don't know, the performances were over the top, or they addressed some themes in a way that didn't resonate with me, or that maybe I find to be weak, or maybe even problematic in some ways, right? Or politically insidious, or that there's a blind spot that I wish that they would have explored, in a different way. So for me, then, a 10 out of 10 is a film that is melodically strong, but then is also like harmoniously robust. That is for me. Yeah. And for me, so that means the performances are solid, that there's some sort of like je ne sais quoi, there's some oomph in the story, in the setting, in the cinematography, like something like maybe they're doing something unique and different. Like Titan for me is what I would call a must-watch film. Is it 10 out of 10? I mean, 9 out of 10, 8 out of 9, something, I don't know. The reason I love it is because...
Oh, sorry.
Well, so the thing that popped into my mind immediately when you read the question was a TV series, which is Station 11. The new TV series, Station 11, for me, it's a mini series. For me, that's 10 out of 10. And the reason is because it's a post-apocalyptic story, but it is this triumphalist post-apocalyptic world that talks about art and narrative and mythology and story as being this savior, the thing that gives us purpose and meaning and community, but also that explores tragedy and that can provide catharsis, but that also might not always give us easy answers, but that introduces us to the mud and the muck of the human experience as we are on this floating marble in the middle of an infinite fucking universe, potentially multiverses. Like, to me, it's existence is also absurd objectively. So for me, story is the thing that kind of grounds us in that absurdity, but it doesn't excuse away or kind of distract us, but it confronts us with absurdity. And so Station 11 for me is a series that did that, and the performances were all amazing, the costumes were amazing, they use Shakespeare in a way that's amazing. It's also very current because it's dealing with a fucking like flu pandemic that kills 99% of the people that it infects. So there's also like some fear shit about being stuck in a pandemic, right? So there was but it did it in a way that was fresh and different for me. I thought there were some really lovely family dynamics explored. Those are the harmonies. And so for me, that's like a 10 out of 10.
What's a movie that does that for you?
Well, Jurassic Park is a 10 out of 10.
Yeah. All right, nice.
Jurassic Park. Terminator 2 is a 10 out of 10 for me. Now, Terminator 1, I haven't seen as much, and I haven't seen it in a long time, but Terminator 2 was one of the first films that I saw that pissed my dad off because I was like 8 or 9 years old, and my aunt let me watch it at her house, and I was like, oh my God, you can do this with a movie? I was like, what? And Arnold Schwarzenegger was larger than life. And even though I don't think it's the best sci-fi film ever made, there's an oomph about it. So like those would be 10 out of 10s for me. Stalker is a 10 out of 10. Wings of Desire is a 10 out of 10. Drink, drink, motherfuckers.
Chris Rincon, take a drink, yeah. We're also waiting to cross off the Man of Violence, Byung-Chul Han, and Terrence Malick references. So whenever that comes up organically, feel free to drink.
Badlands is a 10 out of 10.
There we go.
Yeah, that's a 10 out of 10.
Speaking of favorites, least
anything
favorites,
John
what have you?
Cassavetes has ever made is a 10 out of 10.
There we go. Briar Bookhalter asked us if there are any standout moments, not just standout episodes, but standout moments from the history of SMTM. I mean, you guys have been here a lot longer than I have. What do you think?
Boss Baby.
Tons. Oh yeah. Well, that was what? That was our first batch.
That was like the first 3 or 4. For some reason, that one will always stick in my head because people constantly bring it up in like on Twitter and stuff like that. They're like, this podcast that does these deep dives talked about this silly Alec Baldwin animated film.
Baby. Boss Baby.
I'm looking. Oh, Tetsuo the Iron Man. I think that was.
Yeah, that was great. I was thinking that one.
You know, I like the ones where it's like it was, you know, us, and then you know when Jared was on, like talking about movies that we loved that not many people had seen. Like whenever we got a chance to do those episodes, it was great. Punisher Warzone, that was a funny one. Audition. Antichrist, you know, all these weird ones I love. How many episodes do y'all think we've done? Do you know the answer?
I don't know the answer.
Probably
175.
I was going to guess 200.
200. Okay, well, I already knew the answer, or I already looked up the answer, but I was going to guess in the 150 range, and it's 187.
Ooh,
everyone was pretty
Austin
close.
Wins. Closest without going over.
Yeah. So,
yeah,
nice.
Yeah, that's a lot of films. And now I wasn't here for all of them. Like not all of us were here for all of them. But I don't always have like a standout of like the individual film that I remember the most. But for me, the thing that I always found that was interesting was even when it was a film that I didn't like that maybe I don't think is a good film, I always had good discussions.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes it's weird. I would walk away from the discussion and be like, well, wait, do I like the film now? Because I was able to have such a great conversation about it. You know? And I think that's something that happened frequently for me when, yeah.
So I think we've kind of gone, we jumped on here and said, yeah, we're just going to go all over the place and just have a fun last conversation. And as much as I've enjoyed this, what do you guys think about, you've mentioned performances in other movies. What do you guys think about performances in this movie? I want to shout out Strictly Sega in the chat again, who said, y'all have to talk about Cloris Leachman because she made that film. Phenomenal performance from Cloris Leachman. I think great performances all around, but any other standouts for you guys?
I mean...
Sybil.
Cloris Leachman for me is the one. Like, Sybil Shepherd, I didn't realize that she was so like babylicious when she was younger. Yeah, because I remember Sybil from.
Is she in your song about?
She is. She's like in the first verse.
That's a great video, by the way.
Thanks.
Cloris Leachman is absolutely amazing in this, and it's funny. I was watching it, and you know how when you're introduced to an actor when they're older, like in their 70s or something like that, like you just think of them as always being old. Like for me, Robert Redford has just always been old, you know. So now when I see him like really old, I'm like, well, he's just
always been old, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like what? So for me, that's like Cloris Leachman. I looked back at her and I was like, oh, like she wasn't always old, but it was just so weird to see her. I think she's fantastic in this. For me, that's the standout performance.
I mentioned Clu Gulager at the top of the episode, who was one of those guys that's kind of always been old, and then you see him in this, you're like, God damn, how's it going, Clu? You know, it is just it's a great ensemble, like all around. Seeing Randy Quaid pop up in there,
yeah.
That was one that I didn't remember him being in this at all. And yeah, it almost kind of takes you by surprise. You recognize his voice before you recognize his face, or at least I did. But a great sense of character in the environment as well. That probably goes without saying. You know, so much has been written about this movie already, but just wonderful location work and just a real sense of just like, ugh, just end of the road. Like there's that great shot where they just I think it's Jeff Bridges steps out and just kind of looks towards the middle of the intersection, and they just cut to the one light just kind of blinking. Yeah. And you're like, yep, that's the one in the town.
So you know how I have this theory that every film is a Western?
You do have this
and
theory.
then also that every film is a horror. Maybe every film is also an apocalyptic film, because this film feels very, very, very apocalyptic to me. And it's a sort of tale about the end of things, the end of the world. And then what do? Is there life beyond it? Now, sometimes there's some hope that comes, right? And maybe this is just part and parcel of the monomyth narrative that kind of drives so much of cinematic storytelling too, which is like the figure has to go out and tackle the monsters, and then they come back into society, but the world's been transformed, so they can never go back to the way they once were. So they have this revelation, and so then the world is new, and so you're left at the end with some sort of like radical transformation of the entire sort of like landscape, right? The world, right? So maybe that's just part of it, is that there's like death and rebirth that's always being explored. In this film, there's no fucking rebirth. I think you are left at the end with a kind of like, fuck, this is just the cycle of tragedy that is going to perpetually happen.
You bring that up is it kind of reminds me of another example of that, of like a movie that feels apocalyptic without being explicitly apocalyptic, is David Cronenberg's Crash, which is one of my favorite movies, and it's just similar. Okay, easy, buddy. I'm just kidding. Hey, let's end the show on good terms. I know, man. No, there's this great sense, and I only bring it up to kind of tie it back into Last Picture Show, that what I was saying earlier about how there's this sense of like making mistakes just to kill the time. When you watch Crash, there is that sense of like, it's not that the movie is saying that they live in a dystopian or apocalyptic world, but you just can't imagine these people existing in any other world that is not completely destroyed, like beyond the boundaries of the frame. Just like doing something that is this dangerous for the sake of danger, and like so immensely self-destructive. Like it is just one of those things where you get it. There's just this pervasive, this atmosphere, this mood and this tone where you're just like, yeah, why not just fucking drive head on into each other and just see if we can get our rocks off that way. Like, what do we have to lose? The world is ending. Like, they never have to say that. It just kind of, it's just weirdly pervasive.
Real quick, just for the fans out there that are playing a drinking game, just to reiterate, the monomyth requires the man of violence.
I knew you were going to come back to that. No, but on you know, we've mentioned a couple of other movies in this sort of wide-ranging movie talk. What do you guys think, if the show weren't ending, what are some movies that you wish we could have covered?
Oh, that's a great question. I've sent so many lists of them over the years. I'm gonna look up my
Austin. Do you have any offhand?
I would have liked to have covered maybe some classics a little bit more, you know, some like big hitters that have like interesting philosophical like a Sunset Boulevard, for example, or things like that. I think would have been interesting to cover. Yeah,
I would have liked to do like the weird ones, like, you know, I see a Fantastic Fest, like Septic Man or Kung Fu Hustle, you know, that kind of stuff.
Oh, that would be so much fun.
Or
the Raid 2.
Why the Raid 2? Did you cover the first one?
I think we did the Raid.
No,
2.
just because. Oh,
do you find the second one compelling in a way that the first one isn't, or engaging in a way that the first one isn't?
I find it very engaging, but I don't like it as much, nearly as much. It's way too much.
I like them both, but it's weird that you jump to the second one, Austin.
It's just a little bit ramped up, a little bit more batshit crazy.
It's a little bit more. It's a little bit more comic booky.
Definitely.
Jingle All the Way would have been mine when on my list. But also when we did like that John Carpenter month run, like doing more shit like that would have been great. Like doing a Cronenberg run, Kubrick, sure. You know, like just really kind of looking at somebody's complete filmography would be fun.
Speaking of, Josh Weiss 99 sounded off in the chat saying they wish we could have done No Country for Old Men.
We never did.
I don't feel like we did it. I don't feel like we, at least not this group, we never did any Coen brothers. I know y'all did like Fargo before, but I don't think we did any
Serious
Coen
Man.
we never got to do any.
Man,
I don't think we ever got to do any Cronenberg, at least not since I've been on it. Which
well, we did Videodrome, but that was like in 2017.
That's what I'm saying. I think you may have done Videodrome. I would have loved to have maybe done The Fly or done even maybe History of Violence, something less body horror oriented, but still with a lot of themes of duality and what have you. No Billy Madison, says Dave Smythe. Gabriel Gomez says Jackass. We definitely should have had Michael on for a Jackass special.
Oh,
perfect!
I know.
Perfect Blues says Jonathan Ramirez.
Hell yeah!
Hyperspace Jester says Crocodile Dundee. Nick Easterling says Dolomite is my name with Eddie Murphy. Where were all these recommendations? We missed out. We could use these forever ago.
Only do so many.
Yeah. What about you, Raymond? If there is this is the pinnacle of the show me the meaning film that we did not discuss, missed opportunity, what is it?
I'm trying to think of one that I know there's a lot that we haven't discussed, but I mean, I came onto the show so late. I'm trying to think of one that y'all didn't cover during the Jared days.
I
what do you think, Brian?
I don't think we ever did Primer.
Primer,
and not that I really love that movie, but to me, that is the movie where it's like, okay, it's the one movie that everybody that ever watches it needs completely explained to them in a broken down beat by beat way. So that would be, to me, the ultimate show me the meaning film.
What do we think about Upstream Color?
I love Upstream Color.
It's okay.
Big fan.
Me too. Me too. I like Primer, because it's intriguing and it gets my brain like all in a tizzy. But Upstream Color for me, I think, is actually fantastic.
That was a great year for movies. That came out in 2013. That was not just a great year for movies, but weirdly there were a lot of great sci-fi movies that came out that year, like Upstream Color, Computer Chess. I think Her and Under the Skin both came out that year. The World's End came out. There was kind of something in the water. There were a lot of great movies in general, but.
Funny, because Upstream Color is about
sure.
Surf Nazis Must Die. That would have been on my list.
Oh
yeah. I don't think y'all ever did any trauma.
I know. We fucked up. We talked about doing Toxic Avenger once, but we never did it.
I would throw out maybe this isn't the pinnacle of a show me the meaning movie, whatever that might mean. But I would have liked to have covered The Witch, one of my favorite movies from the past decade. Yeah, The Vovitch. I love that movie. I like that it's having a conversation with Austin, like you were saying, with storytelling as a tradition, and making a movie about folklore and in a way that is like kind of creating its own sort of mythology. I really, really dig that film, and I'm trying to think. We never got to talk about. Speaking of great theatrical experiences, I think my number one theatrical experience of all time is I went to see Raw at Fantastic Fest out here in Los Angeles, and I had just what's that?
Fantastic Fest in Los Angeles?
Excuse me, Beyond Fest, not Fantastic
Beyond
Fest.
Fest, hell yeah.
Yeah, thanks for catching me. So I had just finished a project, and I was like ready to go. I just wanted to go see a movie, and I just got online, and I saw Fantastic Fest was screening Raw that night, and all I knew about it was those three letters, just RAW, and I was like, all right, well, I'd love to go to Fantastic Fest screening. Those are always a good time. They do a good job programming that festival. So, yeah, I'll buy a ticket. All right, I go see this movie that I think was maybe the American premiere of the film. I can't remember. But we all sit down and, people are milling around. They've got their T-shirts and their records, whatever they're buying from the souvenir stands. And then the programmers come out and they say, hey, there's been some people who have fainted in some screenings of this. So let's not make any headlines tonight. We're going to have a good time, but if you're feeling faint, just stay in your seat. That falls a lot better than the one from Standing Up. And then they go, and our friends from Donut Friend have brought some donuts for all of us to enjoy before the movie. They start passing around a box of donuts, and the donuts, spoiler alert, maybe if you haven't seen Raw, all of the donuts are like fingers with raspberry jam blood, and they have like glazed fingernails. And we're passing these around, and I'm grabbing one out of the box and thinking to myself, what the fuck am I about to watch? And as the movie's going, I'm loving it. And then when it gets to the scene that the donuts were referencing, the entire audience, when I won't spoil it, but there's a thing that happens where the movie changes pretty drastically. And the entire audience, we're all sort of like holding our breath, and then we just start applauding and screaming and yelling and cheering and just going insane. And it was just this weird kind of like, you know, collective hallucination almost, where it's like, why are we cheering for this? This is objectively not a great thing to depict happening. But it was just one of those beautiful, ineffable moments I'll never forget. Definitely the best theatrical experience of my life. And
I just spent the weekend.
Obviously,
with,
Michael and I have done Talking to Tan for a while now, but we haven't ever gotten to really do a deep dive on Raw. But go ahead.
Well, I just spent the weekend with an acting coach named Anthony Meindl, who he heads the studio where I train here in Sydney, Anthony Meindl's Actors Workshop. And Tony's here in Sydney, and he's doing some special things. And one of the things he kept talking about, that like fucking our job is to affect people, right? He's got a very sort of like renegade style of acting, which is why he's kind of like the hot thing in LA for acting coaches, right? 25th anniversary, by the way. So if people are interested, go train with them. Great. If you're in Sydney, come train with us here. It's fantastic. But it was just impressing upon me. It was so lovely to be around somebody who just has this infectious energy that was talking about like that those experiences that you had, Raymond, that's why we are artists. That's why people talk about cinema. It's for those reasons, right? And part of the reason why I bemoan the onslaught of just being plugged into the kind of funnel of media being shoved down our orifices is that we don't get to have those moments of ecstatic release because there's never a moment to actually feel impacted. And the philosopher Walter Benjamin talks about how we've been anesthetized, right? So the more that we ramp up our amplitude in terms of consumption, the more then it requires that we get ramped up to have some sort of effect land on us, which then the more that we become, you said it's kind of like what Sybil Shepherd's mom says in The Last Picture Show. You do something long enough, anything becomes monotonous. And to throw out another name, the philosopher, political theorist Mark Fisher, who famously kind of coined the notion of capitalist realism. I can never remember which way he says it, but I always say it both ways because I think it's great. He says either everything is boring, but no one is bored, or nothing is boring, but everyone is bored. Right? And I think that kind of works. It's this sense where everything is boring because there's nothing that excites us, but no one is actually bored because we're constantly getting stimulation. Another way of thinking that is that nothing is boring because it's all exciting, but we're all bored because we're just pacified, because we're just anesthetized by this constant onslaught of imagery, right? And so we need more and more stuff to shake us. And that's one of the consequences of living in like a hedonist culture, is because the stimuli and response system can only go to so many levels, right? Before it just kind of reaches at like a metastable level, right? And so you need more things to fucking shock the system, and then it just keeps going up. And I don't know if we can continue to go, but I'm not sure that it's ultimately yielding the best results for us as consumers of media or as receivers of art. And for me, I want to not lose our capacities to have those ecstatic moments. And as an artist who is a creator as well, I want to be able to still affect people and challenge people on how we think about humanity and relationships and politics and ethics and love and sex and violence. Like, that's why we're storytellers. And I just don't want to lose that impact in the sea of monotonous sameness. And that, by the way, is an allusion to Byung-Chul Han. Drink.
Drink. Well, all right. What do you think, fellas? I mean, it's
yeah, I think we've covered it.
It's about that time.
Oh yeah.
It's been real, y'all.
Sayonara, Sammy. Do you have a good walk away? Like, what's the It's not. Nick from New Girl has this list of walkaways that he's trying to compile. At one time, he says it's not a good buy. It's a bad buy. Bad buy.
Yeah. Any final words of wisdom for the SMTM fans?
Well, Davis here in the chat said this podcast changed not only the way I approached my academic career, but also the way I look at the world. I appreciate it. Time to listen to some owls at dawn. Hell yeah, Davis.
Yeah, on that note, someone else just popped in. Miguel Delgado started watching this podcast when I was in high school, and now I'm a college junior. Truly a great learning experience every time these dudes talked movies.
Thank you,
Joel
Miguel.
Toledo, gentlemen, it has been an honor and a pleasure. What I was about to say, thank you, everyone, and this is me talking to everyone right now, not just the listeners, but you, Austin and Ryan. Like this has been a really fun time. Like I kind of just I was sort of like doing some work for Wisecrack here and there, and they told me like, oh, we have this movie podcast, and you never shut up about movies. Is there any chance you could fill in on this Total Recall episode? And then all of a sudden, I just started showing up. So apologies to anyone who was surprised or put off by that. But it's really been a blast. And for everyone saying that this podcast has meant a lot to them, despite the fact that it's coming to an end, you should recognize that this show would have ended a whole lot sooner if it weren't for your support. So as much as you dig the podcast and we appreciate your support, like we got to emphasize, we appreciate your support. There's no chance we would have been able to do this for as long as we have if it weren't for all of you. So, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I can only speak for myself. I'm sure Ryan and Austin have nothing nice to say about this.
Hell no. But, I mean, hell yes, I do.
This has been a blast. What do you guys think?
I wanted to also echo that the emails we get. That's one of my favorite parts of doing the show is after we say some stuff, and sometimes I'm not the most prepared, and I'm like, oh, and I like hearing your feedback, no matter even if it's good or bad in the thing. The fact everyone that took time to write those emails, that was really awesome. And anyone that commented, and Raymond, I loved when you came on. You were a great addition to the podcast. We've been going for years at that point. And, I think that we all kind of bring something to the table here. And you, Austin, are, how long have we been doing it together? 6 years at this point?
God,
and I've met you once in the flesh. One time. Yeah, I love that. This is truly a modern working relationship that it's been great. We're buds through movies. We've only been talking on this podcast, and it's awesome. That's I'm glad that we all got this opportunity to do it. You guys are my friends.
Yeah, it's been great. Honestly, like it's not very often that you get to like wrap things up in life, and even though it wasn't on our time, like it kind of came out because of corporate decisions and needs. We were still able to kind of figure out what did we want to do for our final few episodes, and it was kind of great that we got to have a final episode that really got to wrap things up, which is kind of nice, and then to let people know. And then I think what that also did is it allowed people to express some of their sadness or joys and memories and things like that. And I got really overwhelmed. I've gotten a lot of DMs over the years just from people that have said some pretty heartfelt things about conversations that have been inspiring or illuminating, or the way that we addressed a certain topic, how it was important to them by, giving voice to certain topics or to individuals that maybe weren't getting it. So I'm actually really proud of the output that we've been able to put out, and I'm more thankful that that it's landed with people, because to me, if performance is about affecting people, this is just another aspect of performance. It just happens to be something that's more true to who I am in my day-to-day, rather than a character or some sort of narrative on top of it, So thank you for letting us know that we had an impact. And then also, I think about movies differently now because of all of the hosts that we've had and all the guests that we've had, And so for me, I've learned so much. Like, I have seen so many movies that I've either never seen before or that I'm revisiting with totally fresh eyes. And by being able to talk with you guys and everybody else that's come on about them, I think it's made me a better movie watcher, and it's kind of like raised my standards for what it is that I maybe expect about film and what I expect about the world and how I expect people to create things and be artists. So I don't know. I'm very thankful for this time. It was very wonderful. So yeah. That's my sappy goodbye.
And also like yeah, I agree with everything you just said. And second it, but also when we started this thing 5 years ago, I forget what your experience was, Austin, but me and Jared had no clue what the fuck we were doing in terms of podcasting. I had never done a podcast, and yeah. I'm not very good at like public speaking, so you've literally watched everyone out at home has been watching somebody who's not very articulate try to learn how to in real time to podcast. So that's also something that's been kind of a funny evolution. I don't think I'm that much better at it now as I'm rambling through here at the finale, but
you're certainly one of the most relaxed podcasters I know. you always, that's one of my favorite moments we were talking about before. One of my favorite moments of SMTM is anytime we see Ryan smoke up and then like wave the stuff away and go, yep, totally.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because to me, this has always been just hanging out, like it just happens to be recorded, but it's me hanging out with two buds, talking about movies, which is how it started and how I think it's ending. But there just happens to be people watching it, So hopefully it was entertaining and informative, which I know which you guys definitely brought the informative shit. So I think this has been a great collaboration between everybody involved. Oh, and all the people. Let's shout out the people behind the scenes too, like Matt and stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Matt, our producer for the last what's it been, a year or something like that, and then Joy, previous producers. Yeah, and we had so many awesome, cool people that were part of Wisecrack that came through too. Some of whom who aren't even, I don't think, with the company anymore, who aren't producing content anymore, but who are just like academics or who are writers or whatever. And then we had lots of guests come on. So we've had lots of like really kind of rad experiences with some cool people come through. It's been
Mike
great.
Burns was on, Alec was on, Lex was on, Jared was on, was it Pete Davidson's best buddy was on or whatever his name was.
Yeah, was it Dave?
Dave something.
Yeah, Helen,
Dave Sirius or something.
Riley.
Yeah. Riley, yeah.
It's been
Claire was on.
Greg Edwards.
Greg Edwards, that's right. Yeah. Well, I guess we're winding down here, so
we're gonna get caught reminiscing all night.
Yeah, I know.
The last picture show, man.
It is the last picture show. Let's talk a little bit about kind of what we've got coming up ahead. We do also want to say we've been given the green light by people to plug a new show. And Raymond and I have been talking actually for a little while now about doing something. And Raymond, I don't know if you want to give people a little bit more info, but we do have something live. We have recorded a first prologue episode, but it is a new film podcast that we're going to be doing, but it's going to be a little bit different than Show Me the Meaning, but while also hopefully appealing to you Show Me the Meaning fans out there. Raymond, can you just tell them what's up?
Sure. Yeah, we touched on this briefly during last week's episode, but like you said, Austin, we have a place for folks to land if they're interested in this new project. Austin and I are doing a movie podcast called Cinemathology, and it's kind of about the as I say in the prologue episode, kind of about the intersection between popcorn and poetry. Or maybe cinema and mythology is a better way to put it. But you can check out the podcast on Twitter. We just started an account today. It's at Cinemathology on Twitter, just one word there. And the prologue episode is currently live on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I believe a handful of other podcatchers, but we haven't ironed out all the creases yet because we kind of had to put this thing on its feet pretty quickly when we found out that this show was coming to an end. But yeah, like I said last week, we're still going to be talking movies, obviously, and Austin will be there, so you're going to get a good dose of philosophy, I'm sure, and you'll probably hear a lot more about the the Man of Violence here and there, or Wings of Desire here and there. But we're going to do kind of like a season approach, where rather than jumping from movie to movie, we're going to do really deep dives on certain directors and then maybe eventually other professionals in the film industry. And our first season is going to be the entire narrative filmography of Martin Scorsese.
Boom.
So if that if that does anything for you, we hope you give it a follow, give it a listen, and yeah, like I said, the sort of appetizer is out there right now. We won't be able to start recording and releasing until May because Austin and I are pretty busy with some other engagements. But we're both really, really excited about this, and we think it has a lot of potential to not only keep these kinds of conversations going, but really take a bigger look at cinema history as a whole and kind of try and carry some narrative threads across different episodes rather than, like I said, jumping from movie to movie to movie. So yeah, we're really excited, and Ryan, we hope that you'll join us for an episode here and there.
I'll
man.
be there, dude. I'm excited.
Awesome.
I love Marty. He makes good pictures. I like that Marty guy.
Yeah, we'll be talking a wonderful picture. Wonderful picture. We'll be talking about the pictures.
Yeah, so that's out now. Like Raymond said, go give us a follow on Twitter. Make sure you subscribe on all the other places where you get your podcasts and stuff like that. And Cinemythology, Cinemy Thology.
Cinema and mythology.
That's right. So Cinemythology. And yeah, and I'll be tweeting about that too. So you can follow me on Twitter, Austin_Hayden. Hit me up on Insta, AUS_HAY. Always got things going on. As someone said in the chat, thanks so much, by the way, for the shout. You can check out my philosophy podcast called Owls at Dawn. And that's pretty much how you can keep track of me. Ryan, where can people keep track of you in the future?
Ryan Shorts. I just released a video today that's tricked most of the city of Memphis into believing that there's a water slide attached to the Bass Pro Shop Pyramid. So go check it out. People have been calling them all day. I'm sorry, Bass Pro Shop Pyramid employees, but go check out my commercial. It's on Ryan Shorts on all the platforms.
That video is my fucking ringtone, dude.
Oh, you mean the
and
old
Raymond,
song? Oh yeah, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Raymond, where can people find you and keep track of you besides Cinemythology?
Yes, yeah. So in addition to at Cinemythology, last shameless plug, you can find me on Twitter and Letterboxd. I'm at Crematoria.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We love you. Heavy hearts, but bright eyes. We're sending off. For the last time, Ryan, can you send us out of here?
This has been the last picture show on the last podcast of Show Me the Meaning! Goodbye from Hollywood, California!
That was one for the ages.
Later.